KRQE News Special, the best of KRQE Investigates 2024.
Hello and welcome to the best of KRQE Investigates 2024. Over the next hour, we will show you some of the very best investigations done by News 13's Ann Pierret and Gabrielle Burkhart. We begin with a story that has rocked Albuquerque and has been called possibly the biggest police corruption scheme our city has ever seen. In late February, Gabrielle Burkhart sat down with a man who claims he has proof of how this scheme worked.
It's shocking and quite frankly disgusting.
If you need to get off of this,
I do.
okay, you're at the right place.
It was the most traumatic experience I've ever had in my entire life.
Carlos Smith's nightmare goes back to June 25th last summer.
I'm Officer Montano with APS. Stopped you for speeding.
Yes, sir.
Police lapel video shows the 42-year-old stopped by Albuquerque Police DWI officer Joshua Montano near I-25 in Central.
Carlos, why are you going so fast, man?
I apologize. I was just trying to get over in the lane. My bad.
Okay. Where are you coming from?
Downtown? Pizza place?
Okay. Any alcohol tonight?
No, sir.
No? Can I look at your eyes real quick?
Yeah.
Officer Montano checks his eyes.
Can you step out real quick?
As the officer explains more field sobriety tests, Smith admits,
I'm nervous.
saying he's concerned about his 16-year-old cousin who's watching from the car.
Just try to relax.
My cousin.
Oh. All right.
That'd be a good example. I shouldn't have sped. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, let's just see how you do, okay?
He does an eye test,
One.
walks in a straight line, and for this one mentions knee problems.
This is the bad knee, so can I do this leg instead?
Any leg you like.
Okay. 1, 2002, 2003.
Smith then counts backward
47, 46, 45, 43.
and successfully recites a portion of the alphabet.
F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R.
But in the end,
I do have to give you the opportunity to do a breath test.
Okay.
Okay, I do have to place you in handcuffs and I do have to place you under arrest.
Seriously, sir?
Caller, still be here. Turn around.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
To be truthfully honest, I was lost and super confused. I didn't know what to do, so I had no choice but to proceed and do what he asked.
leaving his cousin to wait for a ride.
She's totally fine.
Smith is taken to the Prisoner Transport Center downtown and willingly takes 2 breathalyzer tests. Montano takes off his lapel camera, so it's hard to hear this interaction.
But I forgot your head wash.
But you can see Officer Montano taking off Smith's Apple Watch and bracelet, something Smith's attorney says raises red flags.
The fact that he took off his lapel camera to interact with Carlos while he was effectuating the arrest was improper, violates standard operating procedures, and again goes to show the officer's intent to extort Mr. Smith.
After blowing below the legal limit of .08 twice, Smith was still arrested and booked into jail for DWI.
It started to make more sense and put the clues together when he decided to leave me a voicemail.
Hey Carlos, this is Officer Montano with APD. I was just giving you a call because I don't know if you realize, but I'm sure you do that. Some of your jewelry was missing from your property from Sunday evening, and it looks like the PTC officers didn't put that in your property bag, but I have it.
In a follow-up phone call, Smith says Officer Montano told him he could get his bracelet back from his attorney friend. Where did you go?
And it was one of the houses that was rated and was on television. When I saw it, I was like, wow, I was at that house.
Smith says he was sent here, defense attorney Thomas Clear's office, raided by federal agents last month. The FBI is digging into a scheme that News 13 has learned surrounds accusations of officers being paid to get DWI cases dismissed.
This scheme perpetuates a narrative that outcomes can be bought and sold. It undermines our entire justice system.
The proof, he says, is in Smith's recorded interaction with Clear's paralegal Rick Mendez the day he retrieved his bracelet.
I knew from that moment I needed to document everything, and I did. How are you, sir?
You Carlos?
Yes, I am, sir.
Smith says Mendez handed him the bracelet.
What is my next best step to try and not get this on my record? What do you recommend I do?
If you need to get off of this,
I do.
okay, you're at the right place. If
Okay.
you're one of those people that can live with it, then go hire a cheap attorney, not the cheapest.
Okay.
So we charge $8,500 when you could do it in payments.
And with me, you representing me, that would guarantee that this doesn't go on my record?
Yes.
Okay, and the odds of me not going with you and going with the public defender, what do you think about that?
Roll the dice.
Is it okay for a paralegal or an attorney to offer a guarantee to a defendant?
That violates our professional code of conduct. That's 101. You do not guarantee outcomes.
Officer Montano is one of 5 APD officers currently on administrative leave pending the federal investigation. Amid the federal probe, the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office was forced to dismiss nearly 200 DWI cases due to main witnesses' credibility being called into question, in this case, APD officers. Smith's case was also dropped.
I can't understand how a person can abuse their power that way.
The only way that the public is going to be able to trust this police department is if they see the officers held accountable and the lawyers involved held accountable.
Since our reporting, the ACLU has filed a lawsuit against the city of Albuquerque and APD for civil rights violations in this case. Officer Joshua Montano resigned from APD in March after the department says he did not show up to multiple interviews with Internal Affairs. So far, no one has been criminally charged. Thomas Clear III is the defense attorney at the center of this investigation. His DWI case dismissal rate is more than double the typical rate in Bernalillo County. In April, Ann Pierret looked closer at the cases Attorney Clear was involved in.
We were surprised when they didn't show up. But the phone call came in, I don't know, 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that.
It's an experience countless New Mexicans share, their lives impacted by drunk driving.
Try to think of a worse scenario on Christmas Eve with 3 little girls and their parents had just gone up to 9 Mile Hill to look back at the lights and say, Merry Christmas. This is what Jesus has given us.
For Kent Cravens, it doesn't feel like 30 years ago.
It was yesterday. It was yesterday.
The details of the night Gordon House sped 90 miles an hour in the wrong direction on I-40 in Bernalillo County and plowed into Craven's family head-on, killing his sister-in-law, 3 young nieces, and severely injuring his brother.
I will tell you that down to the minute, I remember it very well.
The crash changed the course of his life and shaped New Mexico's drinking and driving laws.
It became a real cry from the community to do something.
His brother's mother-in-law jumped right in. Nadine Milford's name became synonymous with DWI reform. She worked tirelessly with the legislature to shut down drive-through liquor stores and make a 4th DWI a felony. Cravens became a lawmaker, spending more than a decade in the state Senate. He's most proud of getting interlock devices in offenders' cars in the early 2000s.
It has been a long time, and it seems like we have taken a giant step backwards.
He's referring to the FBI's investigation into a scheme KRQE's learned centers on accusations officers were paid to get DWI cases dismissed. Knowing the feds are zeroed in on at least one attorney, Thomas Clear III, our investigative team sifted through 6 years of his DWI court cases to find out how and why his clients' cases were dismissed. From 2018 to 2023, we found Attorney Clear's average dismissal rate was 63.3%. We also looked at the number of cases Attorney Clear had with the 4 Albuquerque police officers whose credibility has been called into question tied to this federal investigation. Throughout the past 6 years, 25 of Clear's clients pulled over by Honorio Alba Jr. all had their cases dismissed. So did the 4 Harvey Johnson handled. 31 of the 36 Joshua Montano arrested saw dismissals, and 5 of 6 cases were dismissed with Nelson Ortiz as the arresting officer. Thomas Clear had a 91.5% dismissal rate with these 4 APD officers. So if one of them pulled you over and you hired Attorney Clear, the numbers say there's less than a 10% chance you would be held accountable for that DWI charge. How? We can only look at reasons for a dismissal. Court records show officers repeatedly weren't showing up to pretrial interviews and hearings, which often led to a case being dragged out too close to the 6-month time limit, leaving no other option than to dismiss. Court documents mention in some cases, Alba and Montano couldn't even show up on Zoom. Other reasons for Montano's 31 dismissals, a flat tire, and not handing over evidence. We stopped by Clear's law office, which the feds raided in January, to ask about his high dismissal rate and the federal investigation. While Clear answered our knocks, he refused to answer our questions.
No comment at any point, no phone calls or anything. Okay, thank you for your time.
They owe this community a lot for this behavior here. Go serve your time. I hope they get convicted. That's a crime. Dear God. Wow.
We brought our 6 years of data to Linda Atkinson, who's run the DWI Resource Center since the 90s. Her work involves presenting research-based solutions on how to curb New Mexico's drunk driving problem.
Disgusting, despicable. To me, it really comes down to the law keepers are the law breakers.
In those 6 years, the 4 APD officers pulled over a total of 71 people who then hired Clear, and a judge dismissed their case. We went through each one and shared with her 18 of them had previous DWI convictions, 10 faced new DWI charges after their case was dropped.
It all makes sense. It's just, I start getting so angry looking at this again and thinking 30 years back, easy. Yep, no change.
Atkinson says when guilty drunk drivers are let off the hook, there's no true deterrent, and that next time, they may not just be hurting themselves.
Pretty corrupt, huh? Yeah. Where's your faith in the system? I mean, where's anybody's faith in the system? And you talk to people who have lost loved ones.
That's the part that makes it hard for me, is it was a conscious decision to just spit in the face of everybody who's ever had a tragedy in their life. And there's thousands of families. And the stories, man, it's hard.
At this point, the feds have not criminally charged Attorney Thomas Clear or any of the 4 Albuquerque police officers. The chief says this scheme could have gone on for more than a decade, so the department is reviewing its own data, going back 12 years to find out which other officers, if any, may also be involved. Since January, APD's opened internal affairs investigations into 7 officers. 5 have since resigned, including Alba, Johnson, Montano, and Ortiz. And Pierret, KRQE investigates.
Our next investigation turns to the officers. One after another, Albuquerque police officers decided to give up their badges rather than be interviewed by Internal Affairs. In March, Gabrielle Burkhart sat down with APD Chief Harold Medina to ask how officers would be held accountable if they kept walking away.
2 months since Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina announced his department launched an internal investigation into its own DWI officers.
I was not shocked that any of them resigned and that they weren't going to make a statement to us.
5 officers have resigned from APD, all targets of the Internal Affairs investigation, and all connected to a federal investigation we've learned surrounds accusations officers were getting paid to get DWI cases dismissed. Lieutenant Justin Hunt resigned in February after 24 years with the department. Honorio Alba resigned that same month after 10 years. This month, both Harvey Johnson and Nelson Ortiz resigned after serving a combined 18 years with APD. And the latest to resign just last week, Officer Joshua Montano. He's been with APD nearly 20 years. Each of the 5 officers turned in their badge before an internal affairs investigator could interview them about possible involvement in the corruption case.
when they choose to resign rather than talk to IA, do you see how that looks?
I think it looks horrible on the individual officer, and I think it looks bad and it makes them appear guilty. But I also know that an inconsistent statement or anything that they've told the FBI before could be a federal charge for lying to an FBI agent. So they have a lot at stake here coming back to us.
Chief Harold Medina believes those officers are following an attorney's advice by not talking and claims completing the investigation is not only possible but a priority with other witness interviews. Meanwhile, a 6th officer, a commander of the Internal Affairs Division, remains on administrative leave.
Could this go beyond these 6 officers?
Without a doubt, we're seeing that the possibility is there, and we are currently still working through. A lot of individuals have retired.
And if those officers were part of a corruption scheme, it raises the question,
how do you ensure to the public, that officers will be held accountable when it seems like some of them have quietly resigned or retired?
Gabrielle, we can't force them to continue to stay here till we terminate them, but these individuals have immensely lost. There's some that are extremely close to retirement that are losing out, and we haven't even gotten to the point of criminal accountability.
Financially, he says they're losing out on paychecks and a full career with retirement benefits. And when the FBI completes its investigation, there could be federal criminal charges.
We may not ever know the full truth and get every single member, but we will do our due diligence to ensure that there's accountability to anybody who wore this uniform and badge in the past.
The federal investigation prompted the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office to dismiss more than 200 pending criminal cases, mostly DWIs the 5 officers were connected to. KRQE Investigates uncovered red flags in some of those cases.
If you need to get off of this,
I do.
Okay, you're at the right place.
Connecting certain officers' DWI arrests with defense attorney Thomas Clear III's office, whose home was also raided by the feds.
The part where you read between the lines is some sort of benefit to the officer from the attorney who charges well above the market rate.
News 13 obtained a copy of Officer Montano's resignation letter, which states the issues I let myself get caught up in within the DWI unit were generational. In order for him to talk, he says he, quote, needed to not be the city's scapegoat for its own failures. He wrote, I take responsibility for my actions. But Montano doesn't elaborate.
But I gave my commitment to the public, no stone will go unturned.
Nearly a decade into being under the watch of the Department of Justice in a settlement agreement focused on reform, this year APD is closer than ever to full compliance. Since news of the DWI scandal broke, critics have asked how this wasn't brought to light earlier.
I honestly compliment so many parts of where we are today because we actually went in compliance and had accountability set up.
The chief credits part of the reform process with exposing wrongdoing.
A lot of the changes we've made through our reform process, actually, I think in the end is going to explain quite a bit as to how this scheme was forced to change to the point where it became exposed.
Have you learned anything that surprised you through this process from January, to now?
And I've learned that politics are rough, and God put me in this position, and I'm in a good place in my life and in my career where I'm here to do the right thing, but it is, without a doubt, been probably the most challenging 3 months of my 29 years of law enforcement.
Gabrielle Burkhart, KRQE Investigates.
Chief Medina says he has already filed police misconduct reports with the State Law Enforcement Academy, which could impact those officers' law enforcement certifications. Is it illegal for an officer to refuse to testify in a DWI license revocation hearing? Find out when we come back. In DWI cases, the state has 2 chances to hold drunk drivers accountable. There are criminal penalties in court, and New Mexico can take away their driver's licenses. In October, Gabrielle Burkhart uncovered a problem involving a law enforcement agency going rogue.
So you guys okay?
3 separate cars hit on a dark road in Valencia County.
He smells of alcohol, like he's completely drunk off his...
Witnesses say the driver who caused the crash was going the wrong direction.
He hit me, hit her, still tried taking off and everything.
Valencia County Deputy Brandon Lujan took the report in October 2022.
I need you to be honest with me, bro. I'm smelling the odor of alcohol. How much have you had to drink tonight?
A couple beers.
The deputy tried to have the driver, Carlos Baca, do field sobriety tests.
I know what you mean.
You okay? Is your foot on that line?
Including having Baca walk a straight line.
Okay. So what are you telling me? You don't want to do the test anymore? No?
I'm sorry.
Place your hands behind your back, okay?
Baca was arrested, charged with aggravated DWI. The deputy's report notes Baca's breath alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. Along with the criminal process for DWI, under New Mexico's Implied Consent Act, Baca's driver's license should have been revoked. It's something drivers can fight by requesting an administrative hearing to try and convince a hearing officer there isn't probable cause to revoke their license. It's something the arresting officer can argue. In this case, Baca did request a license hearing, and what happened there is shocking.
This hearing is being held by Zoom video conference.
An audio record of that license revocation hearing from December 2022 reveals Thomas Clear III is on the call as Baca's defense attorney.
Good morning, Your Honor. Thomas J. Clear III on behalf of the motorist Carlos Baca, who is at work right now.
Clear is now under federal investigation, accused of working with police officers to get DWI cases dismissed. While there's no proof that happened in this case, something strange did happen.
But this was a unique case I wanted to let you hear.
We played the recording for Linda Atkinson, Executive Director of the DWI Resource Center.
All right, and on behalf of the Motor Vehicle Department, Deputy
Brandon Lujan.
The deputy who made the arrest is on the call. Step 1 in ensuring the accused drunk driver will have his license revoked.
The breath test results are partially illegible. Do you have a copy, a clear copy you can email this morning, Deputy Lujan?
No, I don't, Your Honor, and I just want to state for the record, I'm going to refuse to testify this morning.
Oh, okay. Can you elaborate, or?
I'm just refusing to testify.
The hearing officer's surprise is apparent.
Well, you've been subpoenaed. However, I don't have contempt powers under the Implied Consent Act, and I will note that its revocation is rescinded because you refuse to testify.
Okay.
Meaning the accused drunk driver will automatically keep his driver's license, allowing him to stay behind the wheel. When she thought she'd heard it all.
Anything further, Mr. Clear?
No, be safe out there, Deputy. I know your job is a dangerous one, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
I know you have a dangerous job. You ass. He just let an impaired driver go. So it makes it more dangerous, don't you think? Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
When somebody does refuse to testify, is that acceptable?
They're expected to comply with the subpoena. There is no good justification to ignore a subpoena and to refuse to testify or cooperate.
Brian Van Densen is the chief hearing officer for the state agency that handles license revocation hearings.
The Implied Consent Act hearings in the license revocation process save lives, so people will get on ignition interlock sooner, usually, than what the court process takes to get an outcome in the court process. And of course, when people are on interlocks, that improves public safety for everyone else on the roadways.
For the process to work, though, officers have to show up and testify to facts of their arrest. Officer attendance issues are prevalent statewide, Van Densen says, but for an officer to show and then refuse to testify, that's another problem.
If you show up at a hearing and you decline to testify, that might have been the case where you could have made a difference, and we'll never know the answer to that.
But consequences for a refusal, that's up to the law enforcement agencies, he says.
We originally agreed to allow that to happen.
Valencia County Sheriff Denise V. Hill says she originally supported her deputies refusing to testify, thinking it might hurt their DWI criminal case if something an officer said could be held against them in court. Today she admits that hasn't happened.
Going forward, will you be okay with deputies not testifying at these?
No, we have had a meeting this morning and we sent out a directive that everyone is fully aware that these MVD hearings are very important, and that they will show up to them if they're subpoenaed, and they will give testimony.
Baca's aggravated DWI case was ultimately dismissed in court due to, quote, insufficient evidence. And without the deputy's testimony, he was allowed to keep all of his driving privileges. Twice, the state had chances to hold an accused drunk driver accountable. Twice, there were no consequences. Something Sheriff Fee Hill says won't happen again under her watch.
We've remedied that.
What brought about this change?
You did. I mean, you know, you brought it to our attention that this occurred. With everything that's been looked at over the last couple of days, I mean, our goal is basically to really educate further and prepare this traffic unit to do the best that they can when they are dealing with DWI.
Gabrielle, Burkhart, KRQE Investigates.
Sheriff Fee Hill says the deputy was not disciplined in this case because she does not believe he acted in bad faith. Going forward, she says, there will be consequences. If you have an issue with your homeowners association, where do you turn? It's a question one neighborhood grapples with when this KRQE Investigates special continues. It's a story that will have you thinking twice about what your homeowner association dues are actually paying for. In September, Pierret showed us what's happening in one metro neighborhood and why they think it went unnoticed for so long.
So it's $600 even for every single one. So there wasn't even a time that she missed on a monthly basis.
$600 paid monthly directly to the now former homeowner association president, signed by the now former homeowner association president. We're not naming the exact association located near I-40 and Wantabo or the former president to protect her identity because she hasn't been charged with a crime.
And it says $10 per home. So I was like, well, what does that mean?
You were not aware of that?
No, I was not. None of us were aware of that.
Jocelyn Reichbach says members pay $50 a month as part of the HOA. And according to multiple association expense reports, bank statements, and check receipts going back at least 15 years to 2009, the former president was paid $10 each month from everyone's dues but one, her own. That's around $7,200 a year, or 20% of the HOA's annual income. Now neighbors want to know what that money was used for. The checks say maintenance.
These are all the boxes that we acquired when we became, I became the interim president for right now.
In the new role, Reichbach spent a lot of time sorting through the HOA's records, but says she can't find any documentation dating back to 2009 stating the president of the nonprofit could pay herself a monthly salary.
So we haven't found anything like that, and we've asked neighbors and nothing to back that piece up.
And looking through the HOA's bylaws, it states the neighbors have to approve any payments with a vote.
It doesn't specifically state any like salary or hourly wage in there. It kind of just says like, you can get reimbursed for expenses.
But Reichbach says that wasn't even voted on because they've never had a meeting, not since she moved into the gated community in 2019. Luis Oaxaca, who purchased his home in 2012, said the same.
Never done any meetings.
Which means they've also never held elections. So the former president held that position, the two say, since she was first elected in 2003.
I mean, your own people, you're taking money away from them. This is not right.
Oaxaca is one of the neighbors who attended a few meetings in June to talk about moving forward. And around the same time, he says, they received this, a resignation letter from the longtime president. She didn't show up to their meetings, but her husband did.
And he wanted to talk and to excuse himself and his wife. And I said, I'm not going to let that happen here in front of all these people, you know.
Oaxaca says he started recording this video when the interaction got heated, with the husband telling them some people knew about the payments.
They're not here today because they just haven't. But in all honesty, we felt that the amount of work that we were putting into that, the time and effort, we were putting 40 to 50 hours a month into it. by filing liens against people who don't pay their dues on time, by dealing with the courts and the lawyers, by going to the city back and forth.
The same reasons shared with one neighbor in a September 2020 email from the HOA account.
But to be fair, if you are paying yourself, that should be sent to everyone without people asking. I think that is fair.
Agreed, and we never updated that, but there were people that and paid. I'm admitting the mistakes were made.
Mistakes isn't a strong enough word for Reichbach.
Do you think she committed a crime?
I feel like she did.
She filed a police report, and Albuquerque Police's organized crime unit is investigating. Reichbach also called the New Mexico Department of Justice and the Secretary of State, thinking they'd help her hold the now former president accountable. But she quickly learned there's no department in any local or state government office that oversees HOAs. So the neighborhood's only other recourse is paying for an attorney to sue.
And I was just like, wow. You know, like there's like nobody who enforces anything about HOAs. So, you know what I mean? It's like basically a person can just get away with doing a lot of stuff if nobody's paying attention.
Something she and Oaxaca never expected to deal with in their own neighborhood.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of HOAs in Albuquerque. They might be suffering, and it's just the people that can stand up and fight for their rights. So a lot of people is taking advantage, like these people.
How does someone like steal from other people for like years on end and feel okay about it?
We did connect with the former president's husband, who took my contact information and said he'd have his attorney call me. He added, quote, "We have nothing to hide." We haven't heard from them. Their home is now up for sale. Neighbors tell me they watched the couple pack several U-Hauls last month. And Pierret, KRQE investigates.
Some homeowner associations hire a manager for oversight. This outside company or individual will then handle the association's finances and hold the HOA to its own bylaws. Up next, New Mexicans in a battle against FEMA after their lives were upended by a devastating wildfire. More than 2 years since a government-sparked wildfire took everything from victims in northern New Mexico. Hundreds of those victims say the federal government is still failing them. In May, Gabrielle Burkhart visited the burn scar, where families say they are fighting another battle, this time with FEMA.
There are some things you can't put a price on.
It was just a really beautiful piece of property.
It was.
Both of our boys' bedrooms are over here. Our oldest son was in this corner. Our younger son was in this corner.
Toby Dolan shows us what was his 3-generation family property in northern New Mexico near Mora.
Through the gap in the trees over here, you could see Hermit's Peak real clearly. That's where it all started, right there.
Dolan is one of hundreds of victims still left with an empty lot.
Now we've got elk tracks coming through the house.
His house and everything in it burned 2 years ago in the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon wildfire, the state's largest, most destructive fire sparked by the U.S. Forest Service.
I mean, this is going to be retirement for all of us, and then with the intentions of passing it down to our kids as well.
The retired New Mexico State Police captain and his wife raised 2 sons here.
Yeah, they had good times here.
Now grown men, too heartbroken to visit the ashes of their childhood home.
I mean, you lose things that just flat can't be replaced. I mean, you can't attach a dollar sign to it or anything like that.
But he has to try. In order for thousands of victims like him to rebuild, the federal government set aside nearly $4 billion to repay them. President Joe Biden vowed
fully compensate survivors for their total loss.
But today, Dolan says he hasn't seen a dime yet from the government, and he's not alone.
That's been a process that's been very aggravating.
So currently, we have over 1,500 individual plaintiffs that we represent.
Brian Colon is a former state auditor, now managing partner for Singleton Schreiber, attorneys representing victims of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon wildfire, now in lawsuits against the Federal Emergency Management Agency, better known as FEMA.
They have failed to recognize all the damages to fully compensate those victims of the federal government's negligence.
FEMA set up a local claims office to process payments, and while Cologne credits New Mexico's federal delegation with the Fire Assistance Act, directing the claims office to provide compensation for victims of the fire, Cologne says FEMA is failing to meet a 180-day deadline and failing to account for non-economic damages.
25 weeks would have been acceptable, but 25 months? These folks essentially have been re-traumatized by FEMA.
Aside from the actual structures the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire took from their family, it also took the proximity Dolan had to his elderly mother, who used to live just a few steps away. Now she's renting an apartment more than an hour away from where he's currently staying.
We took the drive to their weekender rental, meant for visitors staying for a weekend in the mountains.
We thought it was temporary, but
Tangi Dolan is Toby's mom and cares for her 99-year-old mother here too.
To be homeless at that age is pretty disturbing. You know, I trust God. I know He's going to take care of us, but there's a level of anxiety for sure.
So why has the claims process taken so long?
Like with any new program, there have been challenges with programs, with the software that we had, with our capacity. We had limited space and limited people.
Deborah Martinez with the FEMA Claims Office says things are moving faster this year with a new director and more staff. She also claims
we were disturbed to find that not all law firms are presenting the offers that we're giving them for significant amounts of money for their clients. They're not sharing those with them.
How do you know that those offers were not shared with clients?
We just know.
Will you tell me who the attorneys are?
I can't.
FEMA's allegation that attorneys are not sharing offers with their clients is preposterous. Under our rules, as attorneys, we have an obligation to extend and share those offers and then give our legal advice as to whether or not those offers are acceptable.
And many of the offers aren't, Cologne says. For its part, FEMA's paid out hundreds of millions of dollars so far, and Martinez wanted us to talk to Jerry Gomez.
Yeah, I've been here all my life.
He didn't hire an attorney, and with a partial payment from FEMA, he started to rebuild.
Everybody had to start from scratch.
The governors visited his property, and Gomez was featured in political ads, but he denies any notion political relationships give him a leg up.
I find myself, hopefully anything that I say or anything that I can do is for everybody, not for me. No. Yes, I lost everything, but on the other hand, this world is a lot older than we are, so let's not give up on it.
Like his neighbors, he still has a long way to go.
We don't play favorites. We take every case in the queue as they are put into our system.
For now, Dolan and his wife are living with their employer, his family leaning on the generosity of landlords and friends, worried about overstaying their welcome.
You never know, they might want it to be a weekender again.
So how do you put a price on a generational loss?
What we were going to pass on to kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, and there's nothing left to pass on.
Those folks of northern New Mexico will never be made whole. You can't give them back what the federal government took away.
Payment for losses you can't see, Cologne says he'll fight for in federal court. Gabrielle Burkhart, KRQE Investigates.
FEMA's new director of operations took the helm in May. The local claims office says it expects the office will be around for years. To date, FEMA says it has paid out more than $1.6 billion in claims. One more investigation coming up after the break. A year and a half ago, the governor created a council of child welfare professionals meant to share insight and recommend policy changes to improve the many problems within CYFD. In April, Pierret asked what the council has done.
I had high hopes for this.
Hopes her perspective and input mattered, and she could impact real systemic change within CYFD.
I feel like every email I send is just sent to junk.
Barbara Yale tells me serving on the department's Policy Advisory Council feels meaningless.
This policy council that I'm on is full of wonderful people with wonderful ideas, and we have all shared our ideas so many times. And the people who are supposed to be listening and making the decisions have not done a single thing that we have suggested.
Yale runs the nonprofit Lighthouse Foster and Adoption Support in Roswell. As a former foster mom who frequently works with her local CYFD office, she says she was excited to get the chance to make a difference when the governor appointed her to the council a year ago. But
they have asked for our advice. It's a policy advisory council, and we have given them advice solutions, and they have not done them. And it is on them that this stuff is happening.
Like kids still sleeping in offices and overwhelmed staff forced to call police when the behavior of those kids gets out of hand. Issues Roswell's CYFD office has dealt with for months.
We have offered some suggestions, like I said in the past, about helping retain and recruit more foster families. Same as with staff, like we've offered solutions to help improve their staff retention.
Is any of that being listened to?
It does not feel like it.
At the council's first meeting, the only one open to the public, then acting CYFD Secretary Teresa Casados made it clear she wouldn't tell them what to do, but hoped the council would focus on those two things, retaining and recruiting both CYFD staff and foster families.
They are really designated to help drive the policy that we create within the organization to make sure that it works for people. So they'll be working very closely with the department in helping us to drive the changes that we're making.
But are they doing that?
I think, a lot of the work that we've been done has been on the transformation.
That's Yale's frustration, explaining while they have monthly meetings, those consist of the secretary reporting what she and the department's transformation team have done or already plan to do, then asking members what they think.
It's a conversation that I'm having also now that I'm more as a permanent secretary here in the department, is really how do we increase the communication with the advisory council so that it's more of information coming from them on solutions as opposed to me just reporting out to them on what we're doing on the transformation.
So what's the point of the advisory council?
That's a good question.
A question we wanted to ask of the person who created the council, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. After a month and a half of sending more than 15 emails and phone calls requesting an interview, the governor's staff told us she wasn't available, despite the fact that she did multiple interviews with other media outlets during that time. In the end, the governor's office sent a statement, not from the governor, but one of her staffers. So we let them know we would show up to one of her next press conferences to get our answers. Since the governor created this council with a veto and executive order, we felt we had an obligation to have our viewers hear directly from her.
Hi, Governor. Ann Pierret with KRQE. I've been trying to get an interview actually for the last month and a half.
I'm busy.
On the CYFD Policy Advisory Council. Would you have time to do one now?
I can answer a question and do it right now. Okay, 30 seconds. I've got another interview.
Knowing the council hasn't produced any reports with policy change suggestions since its creation, I asked, what has it achieved?
The fact that we're making sure that contracting with foster parents, doing the training, engaging in any number of other activities, including making sure that we're catching up on protective services, doing the forensic work to understand what those problems are, all of that got supported by the advisory council.
The governor spent the next minute and a half listing goals for CYFD.
But that's specific.
They've hired more. Yes, the council's job isn't to. What do you think the advisory council would do?
I've heard from council members that they don't feel that they're being listened to, that their emails are going to junk, that nothing that they are suggesting regarding kids sleeping in offices, things like that.
We're building a whole, I disagree.
Okay.
And if we get an individual that feels that way, we'll do more for that individual. But one individual doesn't get to micromanage a department by virtue of being an advisory council member. And not every piece of advice is taken by every legislator, everyone.
What's keeping you still on it?
Hope.
Ann Pierret, KRQE Investigates.
After our story aired, the governor met with her Policy Advisory Council, and in August she filled seats on the council that had been vacant for months. The ball is finally rolling now with this council, but without any results yet, we still don't know what this means for the future of CYFD. And that's it for this KRQE News 13 special, the best of KRQE Investigates. Stay tuned as Ann and Gabrielle will have plenty more investigations coming up in 2025. Thanks for watching.